So maybe the panelists could introduce themselves. Maybe we could start with Lee.
Hi, Katie. I'm sorry that I cannot turn on my video because it's not allowed yet. So my name is Lee, and currently I'm a PhD student at Australian Research Centers in Health, in Sex, Health and Society at La Trobe Universities. So my background is mostly working in the health research study with the focus on sexuality, genders, homosexuality, and HIV/AIDS in Vietnam. And I just, I received the scholarship to complete both of my MPS program at Emory Universities, and also like for my current PhD programs at La Trobe University too. Yeah, that's good.
All right, awesome. So, and then maybe we could have Swan introduce himself. So just 1 second. Swan?
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Swan Tut. I'm originally from Myanmar, but I moved to the US in 2009, and I finished my education here. I recently graduated from UCLA in 2021. So very recent grad, and I'll be starting my PhD in sociology at Stanford University in California. I'm doing sociology, so it's a little bit different from what others in this call might be doing, but I'm more than happy to share any feedback and thoughts about the graduate application process, especially as I went through it very recently. So it's great to meet everybody, and I'm glad to be on this panel.
Wonderful. And then perhaps Cherry?
Hi, I'm Cherry. I'm now a PhD student in the University of Sydney, Australia. My research interest is on social and cultural psychology, and my thesis topic will be about reducing ageism and dementia stigma. And before I go into this PhD program, I earned my master's degree in Europe. So I joined the Erasmus Mundus program there. I studied in Poland, in Turkey, Ireland, and there were also other 2 universities in collaboration. And before that, I grew up in Hong Kong. So this kind of mixed cultural backgrounds, I hope I can help you to answer your questions about studying abroad.
Great, wonderful. And then is it So Chen?
Jane, yeah.
So Chen?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am now dialing from Germany, but I am currently studying in Brussels. And I am like Cherry. I am doing Erasmus Mundus right now. I spent my first semester in Austria, and now my second and third semester here in Brussels. And and what I'm doing is a digital communication leadership. Thank you.
Great. And then I'm Kathy Trang. So my background previously was I completed my PhD in biological anthropology, where I was awarded several fellowships, including Fulbright, NIH Fogarty, and a pharma fellowship to conduct research in Vietnam, where I conducted about 16 months of consecutive research. And then right now I'm currently a postdoctoral research fellow at Harvard Public Health. And so I'm also happy to answer questions related to, for those perhaps more in the US thinking about going abroad, but then also in the context of just navigating graduate school for those who are interested or in graduate school already. So as I mentioned, when we had filled out and had disseminated this form for those who had RSVP'd for this particular workshop, there were several questions that had emerged and that people had put into the form. So what we'll do is that we will address those themed questions first from those who had RSVP'd, and then we'll open up to the wider attending audience. And then I think in terms of the format for this, what I'll do is maybe I will ask some of the first themed questions, and for each of these, maybe each of the panelists could reflect a little bit on their experience. And if the question really does not apply to you, or it's one that you don't feel as comfortable answering, then you can feel free to pass that question on. So the first question that for many of the people who had RSVP'd for this session was about the application process. So many of the panelists here have been awarded either different scholarships to study abroad, or who had received acceptances to different master's and PhD programs. And so the overarching question that people had was, what was your application process for, let's say, a particular scholarship that you want to highlight, or application you want to highlight, and what advice might you have for people in preparing their application now as we're entering this fall season? So maybe, I don't know who would feel comfortable starting, or
You
if
can
anyone wants
start
to
on
volunteer.
that, Kathy. Can I start?
Yes,
Kathy?
please do.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so for my application process, it's actually pretty simple. So Erasmus Mundus Joint Masters Program is a program that provides you a wide variety of master's programs. So you can choose from a list of catalog, and then you will have to apply to it individually. So if you're interested in one of the programs, you will apply directly to that. And after you get accepted for the first round of the scholarship, then you will have to apply for the admission from the university. And mostly that involves some requirements, for example, like English language tests and other legalized documents. It really depends on the country that you apply to. And after that, you will go through an interview, or probably, I think, at the first round, acceptance interview, and then the admission. Sorry for the confusing. And after that, I think you just need to complete all mostly legal requirement and travel requirement, for example, the visa and such. And because most of our audience here are from Southeast Asia, so all of these things is something that I think most of us have to really prepare ahead of time. And I think if I have an kind of important experience to share in this process is that you need to give yourself like enough time to prepare for your application. So what I did was that right after the application is opened, I applied for it. Make sure that you read all the information on the website, and do reach out to the administration of the applications if you have any question. And also don't underestimate the time that all of those documents that needs to be legalized take. So always start as early as possible. What else? Also the reference letter. Mostly the scholarship will require that. And I think maybe it would be a great idea to reach out to your referees ahead of time, notify them probably at least 1 month ahead of time, for them to also prepare for your letter. Yeah, I think those are something that are important, but also specifically to your application, make sure you give yourself sufficient amount of time to internalizing what you want through the program, and how you can connect the dots from what you learned to where you want to be, and how the program can support you that. And these things really need time, and at least for me, like I cannot do it like within a week or two. So give yourself sufficient amount of time for all of this work. Thank you.
Would others like to build on what Sok Chang had shared and potentially.
Yeah, I think that I would like to share is my journey. So, you know, like I got my bachelor's in sociology is quite, you know, like long time ago. And after graduations, I do a lot of research on health research. You know, it's really like the social science approach on HIV study in Vietnam. So at that time, when I think about like, oh, now is the time for me to do the higher educations. And I, you know, at that time, I really, you know, determined that I wouldn't do my study in US. So, you know, for me, the first thing I choose where I want to study. And the second thing that I make decisions on is, you know, where I want to study. And I choose to, I want to study in US. So I do all of my search to find, you know, all of the other available scholarship that can, you know, like enable me to study in US. And, you know, like, so it will really depend on the scholarship. Each scholarship have different criteria and different priorities, as well as, you know, different process. And usually like and usually it really depends on how much you know about yourself to make sure that to make you more stand out and fit to the scholarship criteria and priorities. For example, like I failed one scholarship because I don't know myself really well. For example, like Vietnamese have the VEF scholarship that they will fund for Vietnamese students to go abroad for study. And they make really clear in the scholarship announcement that, you know, like your education, like periods educations must be well aligned with your higher education that you want to attain. And at that time, I want to do the master in public health, but my bachelor was in sociology. So it's not really well allowed. And I just think that, oh, I do a lot of research on public health. So that's, you know, that's much show the alignments of my experience, working experience and my study. But it doesn't, it didn't come out, it didn't come in that way. And I felt that VEF scholarship because of that reason. So I just want to share that story because I want every people to, you know, can learn from my mistake, that you don't waste your time on this, on the scholarship is not really fit to you know, your profile. You know, that's the first thing I want to say. And also like the other thing that I want to say is try to reach out to many people that you know, especially people in the field, because those people who are working in the field know more about the field and know more about the scholarship than you do. You know, like when I failed the VEF scholarship, I would freak out. Oh my God, what should I do with my, you know, like higher education will be doomed like this. I cannot, you know, like go to another country to study. And I reached out on to the college that I work, and I work with them, and also the senior, like kind of senior college, and ask them about like available scholarship. And through that, I know about the NIH faculty fellowship that provided by Emory universities, and I applied for it and I got that scholarship. So if I don't, you know, reach out to other people, networking, ask people, I will never know about that scholarship, and maybe I have to go a further way to able to do my do my master program in US. So, you know, like I think that the two main things, the first thing is know yourself. You know, what is your strength, what is your plan, you know, like future plan in terms of like developing your careers, and also like know about the scholarship that you want to apply. What are the criteria for the scholarship? Because like some scholarship they are really prioritize like minority peoples or like women. So if you are a man, you want to apply to that scholarship, you will not have the advantage comparing to women. So know the criteria and also the priorities of the scholarship that you want to apply. And especially, you know, like similar to what Chang say, you need to know the way how to connect the dot between what you have learned, what you have done, and what you want to be in the future. So you can kind of like draw the very big and very concrete pictures about yourself, make yourself, you know, like kind of like marketable, so people know about you and can choose you, you know, instead of, you know, so many other applicant for that scholarship. Yeah, that what I want to share.
Cherry or Swan, do you guys want to add anything about your own application process?
Yeah, sure. I can add some points. I feel like during the application progress, failures is more salient than success, because now I get into one program, but before that, I received many rejection letters. I feel like facing rejection is a normal progress when you are applying the graduate school, and this is just the start. You can tell you not gonna lie. So like every time you face failure, like Lee said, you can learn from your mistake. What have you learned from that? Maybe you mistakenly read the instruction of the scholarship criteria. Maybe sometimes you're just not understand enough of yourself. Maybe you're not really that passionate about the topics. Maybe you're not really that interested in topics. You can't really connect the dots from your own experience to the research topic that the professor they're looking for. So each failed experience can let you know what you really want to get into. So I think these are also valuable experiences. And in practical sense, you can, like before your application, for my PhD program, in Australia, we have to email the professor first, like discuss with the professor what is your research interest, what is your interest topic. So I think it will greatly increase your success rate to your application.
And Swan, did you want to add anything just about your own process?
Yeah, I know I don't want to add too much because I'm sure we have other questions, but I guess one thing just real quick is I think for me, the whole process was a lot of questioning, and that came in a lot of different ways. Like there were a lot of things I did not know. Like at first, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to do a master's program or a PhD. I wasn't sure what type of program I wanted to do. I wasn't sure exactly what my research interests were. And so what I did was I did a lot of questioning within myself, but then also others have touched on this, is to really ask other people. So I started with asking my own professors and my undergrad for help, and just to ask them about the process. I asked other graduate students. I asked students from the programs that I was interested in. I asked professors. I sent a lot of emails during this preparation process. A lot of that was cold emails. So I did not know these people beforehand, but I just told them about myself, and I asked for some of their time to see if they could, share some knowledge with me. And most of the time, I didn't usually get a response because a lot of people are busy, right? But the people that did lend their time were really, really generous and helped me understand, why they chose their program, why it suited them, and what I can do to really prepare the best application for the program. So I would say, if I were to emphasize one thing about my own process, it's just I had to do a lot of questioning to arrive at an application that I felt confident in. And the participants, if you're interested in applying, you shouldn't be afraid to do that either.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of your points. I remembered, years ago as an undergraduate and applying to PhD programs initially, most of my lab experience leading up to my senior year in undergrad, I was doing a lot of work in behavioral neuroendocrinology, a lot of work looking at the impacts of genes and hormones on the brain. And so at the time I thought, well, the natural progression would be to get a PhD in, let's say, genetics or in neuroendocrinology or something. But I realized through the application process that actually that wasn't really what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and it wasn't, and I didn't want to be kind of this person that sits in the lab all day and then theorizes about what happens internationally, or just having a very superficial understanding of that. And so it was really through kind of writing all of these research statements that I realized I didn't want to do it at the end. So then I moved on to the next application cycle and then moved on to biological anthropology instead. So I think, that to say that, it is through sometimes the application process that you come to a better understanding of yourself, but that I think, you can definitely, I think one of the things that really stood out in all the things that people shared is just the importance of speaking to different people and reaching out to different professors or people who are in programs you're interested in, or who have won the types of scholarships or awards that you're interested in, and reaching out to them, asking if they would be willing to share their application material, or at least talk to you about their experiences. I think most people are pretty open and willing to share, so not to be shy about that. And the worst they can do is to ignore your email. It's that there isn't really a lot of stakes to it, I guess. So I think one of the other I would be curious, I guess, as a general wrap up to that question, is like, how long did it take you guys overall to start the process, and would you how much time do you recommend people to locate? If I hear about a scholarship and it's 2 weeks away, is that sufficient time?
I'll start this one because I plan out things very far in advance. So as I was finishing up my undergrad, I went to undergrad at UCLA, and as I was finishing my last year, I was already thinking about applying that next cycle. And so even before I graduated, I attended this mentorship series that talked about graduate school, kind of like the panel here today. And from then I was thinking and writing drafts and writing statements and getting it to people very early. I know earlier, I think Sok-Chen said that, that you recommenders know a month before. I let them know 3 or 4 months before. And then I would send them a reminder a month before, just so they remember to do it. But usually if you book people early, they're more willing to actually do it because they, they're not so busy yet, especially during the summertime. I think now would be the most ideal time if you still haven't and you're still considering programs. And then from then on, I had to take the GRE, which might not apply to a lot of the different programs, but that also took a lot of studying, right? So there might be tests or things that you have to do that you have to study for. So I had to prepare for that in advance as well. And then I try to stay really organized in terms of knowing my deadlines. So I applied to 10 programs, which is a lot, but each program had different deadlines and different requirements. So knowing that really helps as well, going into each application portal and looking at what are the different requirements, how similar or different is it from other programs, what can I use across different programs, but what do I have to write uniquely, right? So there's going to be a lot of questions that come with the application itself. And so you need to really make sure to stay organized and stay ahead. For me, that was probably 6 months or so. But I know for some people it's even longer. So maybe others' experience is different, but I definitely took my time with it.
I totally agree with Swans, because with my master degree, for the scholarship that I got for the master degrees, so actually it took me 2 years, to prepare, because if you want to go to US for study, you need to have GRE, you need to have TOEFL. And these two things take a lot of time. And also because we are from Southeast Asia, in order to apply for universities in US, you need to verify your education that you got in your home country. And it takes time and take money too. I mean, it takes a lot of money, when we are prepare our application. So for my master program, it took me 2 years. And usually, usually for the kind of personal statement and also the reference letters, it's going to take you at least 2 or 3 months. You write for the first time, and then you take time to revise it, and you need to send out to other people to get their comment, their comments and advice on the personal letters and personal statement, and also the reference letter, to see whether it's stand out and is persuasive enough, and also other documentations required by the scholarship and application. Also for the admission application, it takes a lot of time to do it, all of the verify translations, and also contact people to get all of the signatures and things. It takes a lot of time. And And usually the scholarship, is annually scholarship, and they don't change the criteria and also like the application process much, compared to the next year and the year before. So if you know that scholarship, you can prepare from this year and learn from and reach out to people who got that scholarship last year to ask them about their preparing process, what they done, what all of the documentation that they have to prepare, so you can prepare it ahead. And it will save a lot of time for you. But I think like 3 things that take a lot of time. The first thing is like the English requirement that you need to meet. The second one is about all the documentations, and the third one is the personal statements and the referral letter. That 3 things take a lot of time, so prepare everything ahead, because sometimes when the scholarship like release the announcement, it's only let you to have like 1 or 2 months, or some scholarship let you have lesser time to prepare and also the process is very different for each scholarship too. So like be well prepared ahead. It will be much more easier for you.
Lee, we did have someone from Vietnam ask a question about what you had said about, could you explain a little bit what you mean about verify your education in your country?
Oh yeah, so like there's an organization in US that are allowed to verify the degree, the educational degree that people gains from another country. They will verify your studying, they verify the program that you're studying, and also the degree that you got, to make sure that whether that degree is equivalent to, for example, a bachelor's or something like that, undergraduate program in US or not. Because I know that some university in Vietnam are not, how can I say it? Some student, for example, even now they consider like universities, but like bachelor one, but when they send their programs, their transcript, and also like educational degree to that organization to verify, so they lower the educational level, so it's not qualified to get the bachelor one. It's just like lower than that, like college or something. I did it quite a long time ago. It's in 2010 and 2011. Now I cannot remember exactly, but if you want to go to US for study, you do have to go through that process. And I can, if you want, I can, go back to my email to research it again. I remember it's SOPHAS. It SOPHAS.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that organizations will, like do all of the evaluations for your programs and period education degree that you've got. You need to get that from them and use the verified document that SOPHAS sent to you to send to the university at US.
Just for the sake of time, I will move on to the next set of themed questions, which is really related to one of the questions that we got in the chat from related to really, having start an application process generally, or just prepare for one. Like, let's say you have multiple options that come in. How do you go about with selecting a good graduate program or a good graduate mentor? Like, it would be great to hear about your guys' experience in what made you choose the programs that you did, and perhaps navigating in some ways that sort of intricate relationship, because our mentors and who our mentors are have such a profound role on our experiences as master's students, as PhD students, and as young scholars. So if you could maybe reflect on the positives and maybe some things that maybe you might or might not have changed. Well, I could start maybe. One of the things that really attracted me at the time to the program that I did was really my advisor. And I think that's one of the things, right, that really distinguishes between a PhD program and an undergraduate program, which is that it really is the advisor that matters so much for your PhD. And in this case, my advisor was Carol Worthman, and she's amazing in terms of being both a very prominent figure in her field, but then also somebody that was also very supportive and nurturing, and somebody that I just got along with incredibly well personality-wise. And it was just really great and fun to work with her. I think one of the things that you really need to figure out is what is the style of mentorship that you really want and need, and whether the person that you're looking to can actually really provide that mentorship that you're looking for. So for instance, I think sometimes especially in public health, there are many faculty that are very strapped for time and might have a very hands-off approach into how they handle their mentees. And if that doesn't work well for you, then I think you need to really think about what will really contribute towards a positive experience for you. And obviously, I think match of research interest as well. And I think one of the things that, I'm happy to chat a little bit more about, which I think it depends on several fields, right? So like, for instance, in anthropology, we are separately, and in psychology, that are ran and work with hard money, you do have a set of support. In sociology, you do have like 4, 5, 6 years of support when you enter a PhD program, and that's more or less guaranteed. For public health, the situation is a little bit more precarious, and you are funded through your mentors' grants in a lot of cases. And so, that does raise the question of whether your mentor is able to sustain that level of funding for you throughout your PhD. And if they're not, well, what is exactly the plan for that? Because you don't want, to be funded for 1, 2 years and find yourself in a situation where your mentor doesn't have funding for you in the 3rd and 4th year, and then having to figure out and needing to switch to a mentor. If, for instance, in that department, you only have one person that matches your research interests, and you have no way of switching your advisors. So I would think about your advisor, and then who are the other people on your committee in the department that could be on your committee that you could draw on their expertise. And I think that's really important in many ways. As young scholars, we do inherit our mentors as networks. And so it should be the kinds of networks that you would want personally. So I guess I'll start from there. And then I don't know if others might have other thoughts or criteria.
Maybe some.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Thanks, Lee. Maybe something to add on what Kitty said about supervisor. Mentor. I think it really depends on what kind of mentorship, what kind of support do you want. For example, it's probably less relevant in my case because I'm a master's student. I don't really need to. At least I was not required to find my own supervisor to support on my research topics also at the beginning of my application. So I would have to say maybe first defining like what kind of support do you want, but I totally agree with what Katie said about knowing the style of support that you want and also what kind of network you want to be a part of, which I really totally agree. Something that I would like to add on onto that is looking for someone who's willing to support your growth and who is patient enough to support your growth. And I think it's easier said than done in this aspect because people have their own priority. You still need to do the hard work. If you're preparing for your application, if you're looking for your long-term goal or trying to connect the dots from where you are to where you want to be, those kind of introspective exercises, reflective exercises, you need to do it on your own. But that person who you will call a mentor, maybe you need his or her support on helping you defining or probably finding that long-term goal or who you are or who you want to be. Then you will need to find someone who is willing to help you on that. And yeah, what other things do I want to add on this? Yeah, you still need to do all the hard work, and that person will help you give perspective, insights, or experience, or maybe encourage you emotionally through this process. Because writing an application, working on all of those processes, as you heard from other panelists too, that it's hard work. It needs a lot of encouragement. It needs a lot of time. And yeah, so that's my input into this aspect. Curious to hear from others as well.
Yeah, I really agree on being supportive and sharing. But when I was applying the program, I haven't thought that much about what is my supervisor or our supervision relationship will be. So yeah, I think that you also take time, because this is a dynamic progress, not only about the supervisor, it's also about you, how you engage in the relationship. So
I think like for PhD student, I agree with Katie, is choosing a right supervisor is like the key key point that help you to survive through your PhD. Yeah, so there's only the few things that I want to add, like people talking about the mentoring style. I would like to mention about working style too, because if your working style does not like go along well with your supervisor working style, it will be very, very drama. Like, so I really suggest that people try many different ways to know about the personalities, and also by the working style of the one that you want to be your future supervisors. Because like if you are the one, for example, just use my case, for example, like now I'm a PhD mom, I have like 2 kids, like when I'm doing PhD. So I'm very lucky that my supervisor is very, very supportive. And both of my supervisors know that I have something else to take care of, not only my PhD subjects. So they are really supportive, and they are really cares about mental health, and always ask me, like what are the support that you need, like to be balanced in your life, not only work life, but also your other, your daily life. Because, like I learned how, I don't learn the hard way, but I know some of my friends learn the hard way of how to balance between their PhD and their daily life. I always say to anyone who approach me and asking about PhD, asking me about higher education, is learn how to balance your life. PhD is not the only thing, it's not the only center of your life. You have something else to care about, to go with and to live with. So choose a PhD supervisors that could care about your mental health too, not just push you really hard to finish your PhD and doesn't care about your mental health, doesn't care about your life and other responsibility that you have to take care in your life too. So work-life balance is very important too.
Yeah, I think everybody else has said great points. So I wanted to share kind of from maybe an example that can help from my own experience. I'm not entirely sure if I made the right decision yet, because I'm still going through it, right? So it's still a process, but I'm pretty confident, because when it came down to it, I had a couple programs that I was deciding between. And because I had made my program list in a way where, each of these programs would have fit my research interests, right? And so it really came down for me to, like, when I talked to, the professors that would advise me or be on my dissertation committee eventually, did I feel like they were excited about like my research, right? Because I was obviously excited about their research and learning from them, but do they reciprocate that energy, right? Do they reciprocate that enthusiasm? And I think the program that I chose eventually was primarily because Stanford was very encouraging in terms of they saw a place for me, and that's why they're very upfront with that. That's why they chose me, and they had advisors that were willing to take me on that didn't have, like excessive workloads that would prevent them from taking on new students. And so it really came down to that. It was a program that welcomed me, and it had an advisor who I just felt really good talking to. Like when I visited the campus, I talked to the advisor for like 2 hours, like, and it was really, that's pretty unusual. And it wasn't just like super formal talk either. Like I got to ask them about their own PhD experience, like what they value in being a mentor, and having that conversation really made it clear to me that this is somebody that I can not only like learn from, but that I can also grow with. Like they were willing to grow with me and really learn from my research interests as well and support me in that. Oh, sorry, Dr. Chang, I had one more thing I wanted to say. I know this question was also about programs. And so to take a step back, hopefully you want to be in a situation where like your program list, regardless of which program you got into, you'd be like excited to go there. And so that actually depends a lot on your own effort as well, like researching the programs. So really like digging into who have the program hired in terms of faculty that can support your research interests. What are current graduate students doing in the program that are similar to your research interests, and what kind of support do they receive from different funding sources, advisors, right? So really doing that research so that when you do commit to it, and when you do have certain acceptances, you can really say for sure that this is something that you want to do. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to wrap up with.
These are all amazing advice, and I think really just echoing again, like this kind of not only the mentor, but also what the departmental culture is like. And, I think sometimes, and really getting to know what the personalities of different people are, I think it's sometimes when you're younger, you can assume that, you will be the exception. So, maybe they didn't get along with their students before, but you're different. Or, maybe they weren't good to their past students before, but you're going to be different because you're different. But that's not really the case. I mean, that you really do need to learn from past examples and observe, how have they been? What is their history of mentorship before? Where have their students placed? Are those students happy? And using that as some kind of indicator. So I think we do have a bunch of other questions related to kind of the preparing for before and after. And I guess I let's take some questions from the current Q&A. A lot of people ask anonymously, not sure why, but one person had, was curious about whether folks had thoughts about whether there was advantage or disadvantage to applying to the PhD right after undergraduate, as opposed to working a few years.
Yeah, I think I'll chime in on this because this is pretty much exactly what I did. I think an advantage, it can go both ways. I think an advantage was that I was still very much connected to professors at my undergraduate institution. So I was able to have their guidance and like strong recommendation letters because my experience with them was very recent. And then, yeah, I mean, since you're coming out like fresh out of school, you kind of know what that's like, right? If you work for a couple of years, you might kind of fall out of that, and going right into like a PhD program might be a very difficult adjustment for you, like mentally and also like just schedule wise, because being in a PhD program is very different from like working full time. And then I guess a disadvantage is like it might be hard for you to have enough experience. So I kind of try to stick somewhere in the middle where I took a gap year between my undergrad and when I would start for my PhD program, because I wanted to finish up. I was doing a senior thesis in my undergrad. I wanted to finish that up and have that be a strong writing sample for my programs. And then I took the gap year to really like do what we've been talking about, right? Like self-reflecting, researching into programs, and also gaining more like research experience as well. Like part of me being on the staff is because I work with Dr. Dane Lemelson, who was generous enough to take me on as a research assistant. And yeah, I reached out to various people and was able to participate in research projects related to like my subfield. And so that was really helpful. And I don't know if I would have been able to do that if I was, fully focusing on working instead. So, obviously was able to do that because I had enough flexibility. But I would say there are certain advantages to coming straight from undergrad, but also you should also be wary that, sometimes it might feel very overwhelming too, because PhD has a whole set of different expectations from undergrad. And so that took me a lot of time mentally to kind of see myself as a PhD student when I was used to being maybe in like an 100 student, 200 student lecture hall. Whereas now, like, you have to be, really serious about what you want to do, and to really showcase that. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that. Certain advantages, certain disadvantages. It really depends on how you handle it individually and how you plan around it.
I'll also add to Swan's a little bit, but perhaps not so much my own personal experience exactly, but also just zooming out a little bit. So personally, I had taken a gap year and then had applied, but really relatively short amount of time, right? Just a year after undergrad. And, I think for me, there wasn't like a huge culture shock or like much of a difference in terms of my perception of the transition from graduate from undergraduate to graduate, in part because I'd been involved in research really since the start of undergraduate, and then have really was fairly independent in some ways. At the same time, I will say that I think that there are advantages, huge advantages to delaying the application process, particularly if you are interested in public health. And I would say the norm in public health is to take several years between your undergraduate and your MPH or your PhD to really acquire those field experiences. And I think that's the expectations of admissions committees when they are evaluating your application. I would say the main advantage of waiting is that you can so it depends, right? If you're just waiting to wait and you're going to go out and work at a bank or something, and that's probably not going to be a productive use of your time, and that will work to your disadvantage. But if you're actively involved in research or in programmatic types of activities that would kind of offer perspective into the program that you're applying for, then that will work to your advantage, right? So like, for instance, let's say you take off 1, 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and during that time you worked at a university where you were able to get publications and conference presentations out of it, then that will only increase the competitiveness of your CV. I think what's important to keep in mind for a PhD is that the currency of academia is publications and presentations. That's really what will make you the most competitive, and that's really what's going to capture people's attention. So if you can get those publications and publications, you will be much more competitive for scholarships or top programs that you're interested in. I think at some point, I think if you're away and you're doing something that's kind of irrelevant, then I think sometimes people can kind of really question if you really are that interested in academia. And then also people can also wonder, during that time away, do you really have the same energy or the same kind of familiarity with the field that you did as an undergraduate, or, closer. So it depends on what you do after you graduate, but I would say always more experience is better. Did anyone want to add to that or anything? Okay. Yeah. Oh, Lee?
Oh, yeah, I could talk a little bit about that since I waited a while before going back to doing a PhD. You see, I have my SEMH background here. So I took a kind of circuitous route with the PhD process, and I actually worked for a number of years before I went back to graduate school. And for me, particularly what I was doing in anthropology, I found it to be really useful because then when I had to go do on the ground field work, I already knew a lot of people. I already knew the country. I had a lot of experience with, you know, being in other international countries and doing research. And I didn't make a lot of the mistakes that I made my first times living in the country. So that helped a lot because there are just a lot of silly things like logistical things or getting to know the place where you're working or getting to know the language, which can be huge as well, that can really slow you down and when you're doing research. But if you've already done a lot of those things before you even begin the PhD, it's a much, I feel like, smoother process going in. But I also totally agree with Dr. Trang that during the time, you know, if your ultimate goal is to get into a PhD program, during the time that you're not in school, it's good to be doing something actively engaged in research and also to be producing publications and presentations. And I did a lot of presentations before I began a PhD program. And I had a lot of publications that were journalistic publications because I had previously worked as a journalist. And then I had a few academic book chapters, but I didn't have any peer-reviewed journal articles. And looking back on it, I think that a lot of the material that I at first turned into book chapters could have actually been peer-reviewed journal articles. And I just didn't realize that it was like more important to have journal articles. So I would, encourage you to not be shy about trying to submit your articles to journals and everything, because that was part of it for me as well. I think was a confidence issue. That I just felt like, oh, I'm not really advanced enough yet to, to submit to journals. And if you go by that metric, if you're like me, you're never going to feel like you're advanced enough yet. So at some point you just have to say, well, actually, maybe I kind of know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go for it.
Just one thing that, sorry, Sherry, just to quickly add a little bit is, I find that with some of the undergraduates that I've worked with before, I think they have the tendency when, to feel as though they're in this race and they need to finish as fast as possible, or they feel a little bit jealous when someone enters a program earlier than them or something as of the like. And I think, that mentality doesn't necessarily make sense when you take it from a sort of life course perspective, because, let's say, what's the difference between when you're 65 versus somebody 64, for instance? It feels that competitiveness feels much stronger when you're younger, but the actual difference is quite little, in my opinion. In a lot of cases. And I would also say, at the end of the day, right, if you rush into a program that you might not be satisfied with, or that you are not, it's not the most competitive that you could be, is that really the best for you, right? So I think you really to weigh that. So I mean, for some people, they might be ready right after undergraduate or right after, but for I would say many people, they could benefit both in terms of their own competitiveness, but also of self-reflection and slowing down to see what they're really actually interested in, just to, again, maybe take 1, 2, 3 years or something.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Dr. Trang. For me, I also took a gap year after my undergraduate graduation, and then I worked as an research assistant in a research institution. And that time I was waiting for my master's degree to begin in September. So when I was working in the full-time job, I was also conducting, preparing to turn my undergraduate thesis into the publishable manuscript with my supervisor at that time. So that was what I was working on. And at that time, I was already planning to get into a PhD program, but I didn't. I just received a master's program offer. So I still decided to go out because that was a very attractive program for me at that time. I feel like, okay, this is a golden chance for me to experience and travel the world, the Erasmus Mundus program. So I was also very excited for it. And after meeting those amazing people in the program, I met a lot of international friends, and I studied in very interesting subjects and meeting with great supervisors, and some because in almost like before I received master's offer, I also applied to some PhD program, but I got rejections. So at that time, I was almost feel like, okay, maybe it's time for me to give up. I'm so tired. I got burned out. I really don't want to try again. But some of the students, they are my classmates and the same cohorts, they encouraged me to do again. Okay, maybe after a master thesis or after my master's graduation, after I got my undergraduate thesis published, maybe I can get greater chance to get accepted from a PhD program. And it actually did. So I'm really grateful for what I've experienced. And yeah, so don't rush your time. And yeah, I feel like now I look back at that time, I also have the mentality of like rushing myself, and so that's why I got burned out. But yeah, so at the end of the day, you still get a lot of time to do what you want to do.
Yeah, the last thing that I want to add on is like I'm the one who took, so many gap years. Like, I applied for my master after the bachelor, the undergraduate graduations 4 years, and then after my master's, it took me another 4 and 5 years to apply for the PhD programs. And I think that especially for for international student who want to study abroad in other countries like US or UK, if you use that gap here to build up your experience, and it will be the thing that's make you stand out and more competitive to get the scholarship.
So there was, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of taking it slow, which, is kind of how I am in general, Dr. Trang. But yeah, and that it really is a marathon and not a sprint, as much of a cliche as that is. And for me, I mean, I may have taken it like a little slower than I needed to. But even after I was working as a professional journalist for like 5 years. And then first I did a master's before going into a PhD program. And so I did a master's, and then I actually it was supposed to be a 2-year program, and I extended it by 1 year because I got grant money to do international research for my master's thesis, which is really hard to get. And I was like, well, I just want to go do this research. And then after that, I was working for a research center, and then that's when I applied to PhD programs. And I could have actually fast-tracked and gotten the PhD in the university where I did my master's and gotten it in like 3 years. And instead, I decided to start a whole different PhD program in which I got no credit for having had a master's. And and it took me 8 years. So, but it worked for me. That was kind of the timeline and sort of the development of my interests and my research and stuff like that it made sense.
Wonderful. And I guess we have a reverse question in the chat. So it's from someone who wondered, like how, if they were a little bit older, they should find PhD scholarships under projects managed by professors, since many PhD programs given by the government seem to restrict it for people under 35 years of age. So if, let's say, they're interested in doing their PhD in their 40s or what have you, what opportunities might exist for them?
I think you can go to Australia. Yes, because for example, like La Trobe University, they have the scholarship, like research scholarships for a PhD student, cover not only a tuition fee, but also for like stipend too. there's no age criteria at all. I see like other PhD student who are like 50 or like 55 years old still just start their PhD program here. So you still have a lot of like opportunity, just like look out further, not only in one country, maybe in another country too. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think again, this is like a more in some ways field specific, how common it is. I think in public health, I would say in anthropology, there are a number of PhD students that are older, and it's very typical. I would also say there are internal scholarships and awards for, let's say, like MPH, for instance, for those who are like, mid-career. So like I know Harvard, for instance, has its like program for MPH for people who are mid-career in public health, but now are looking to do an MPH or looking to do a PhD. And so they do have special interest in those people. So those types of programs might exist, maybe like the government level, maybe it might be a little bit more restricted in some ways, but they're at the university level. I think they certainly do exist. And I would say, for PhD scholarships, I think, like that exists at a department level. And so I think maybe the question that's implicit in what you're asking is also whether your competitiveness for programs might change if you are a little bit older. And, I think, again, I would say that's university department field specific. I think as a whole, I think psychology might be leaning a little bit younger, where in many departments, it's probably a little bit more atypical to see somebody doing their PhD in their 40s and 50s. In anthropology and public health, I would say there's a bit more of it, but I wouldn't be discouraged just because of your age. And I would say you to really present it as an advantage in terms of the experiences that you bring having worked in your field. If others don't have anything to add to that, I guess another question someone had was just, and feel free, folks, if you have any other questions that we didn't address, to just leave it into the chat. And one of the things I did want to flag, which Zuan has highlighted, is that the poster session is happening in a separate Zoom. And so if you're interested in going to the poster session, please click on that Zoom in the chat. It's not this Zoom, it's another Zoom, another room. And you can go there to look at about 15, 20 different presentations related to mental health and psychosocial support across a range of countries. We'll be going for just maybe a few more minutes since we did start a little late, but we'll be wrapping up soon as well. So I guess another question that folks had in the chat was just, someone wondered if their undergraduate and masters do not align with their PhD program. So let's say they switch fields, then what can they do to strengthen their application?
Well, that's also something that applies to me that I could talk about some. So I did my undergraduate degree in political science, which was not really a well thought out decision. I just thought it was kind of interesting, and I was 18 years old. So, that's how we make these decisions. Although it was social science, so I mean, I did stay within the realm of social science, more or less. I didn't go into a totally different discipline. And then that was part of the reason that I did the master's degree before beginning the PhD that I was talking about before, because the master's program that I did was interdisciplinary. And I could work with people in a number of different disciplines, and especially with anthropologists. And I had a feeling that I was interested in anthropology. But in the US, there aren't that many, say, master's programs that exist in anthropology that are just standalone. I mean, there's some for applied anthropology, but there aren't a whole lot, because usually they want you to get the PhD if you're going into the program. But so this program was an opportunity for me to take classes with anthropologists and to work with anthropologists in an interdisciplinary department. And so then I was able to build relationships, which was really important, because another thing that I found coming out of undergraduate was that I'd been a good student and everything, but I didn't have the kinds of close relationships with my professors that I really needed to get strong letters of recommendation for a PhD program. And so I worked on cultivating those when I was in the master's program. And then that was also when I did the master's research fieldwork as well, under the supervision of 3 different anthropologists. And so that's how I was sort of able to make the argument when I applied to anthropology PhD programs that this is a logical, oops, sorry, my door just closed. This is a logical next step for me. So that was sort of the way that I did it. And also I made the choice to go to a relatively inexpensive state school for my master's degree, because in the US especially, there are some really, really expensive master's programs. And oftentimes I'm not really sure like what you're getting for your money. And so in this case, I felt like I could accomplish what I needed to accomplish at a state school where I had residency and was paying, you know, in-state tuition, which is in the US how it works. If you're a resident of a state, then you get a lower tuition at the school. But that probably doesn't apply if you're an international student. So that's not very helpful advice, except
No,
for
it's
just
still great to hear, I think.
Yeah.
And you know, I think this question also applies to me in many ways, because I've been a sort of like aggressive field switcher. So as an undergraduate, I was a psychology and biology dual major, and then I had you know, applied to PhD programs in genetics, decided I didn't want to do genetics, decided actually maybe I was really actually interested in philosophy, and then applied to master's programs in philosophy, got a scholarship to go to King's College London to study philosophy under Nicholas Rose, decided I didn't actually want to do that, and then applied to PhD programs in anthropology, and then got into anthropology, and then actually decided where my interest lies might actually be in public health, and so then did a postdoc in psychology, and then transitioned fully into public health. So I've kind of skipped around in a lot of fields. And I would say, you know, part of it is in some ways learning the lingo, right? So, you know, I think one of my talents is that I'm able to really, I can kind of like start immersing myself in a field and really pick up the language that they use. Because, you know, we, like, for instance, with like, say, mental health, the way that psychologists speak about mental health can be quite different from the way that anthropologists speak about mental health, in the same way that sociologists speak about mental health, or people in psychiatry speak about mental health. And so knowing what those words are and how people frame their research, how people frame the topics of discussion, the models they draw on, the theories they draw on, that will go a long way in terms of convincing people that actually you're one of them. And I think, you know, and part of it too is, you know, you don't need to, this is something that I've ran into a lot of times in Vietnam in particular with some of my undergraduates, which is they'll do something in some field and then for undergraduate, and then they'll decide, oh, actually I want to do something else. Let me do my bachelor's again. And I think that's really not a great decision in a lot of cases, because you can really substitute it with relevant experience, right? So let's say I did an undergraduate in biology, but I realized what I was really interested in was really mental health and working with people in a clinic-based setting. Well, you know, what I can do is get a position at a clinic-based setting and start working with actual, you know, participants in a clinical setting, getting those types of research experiences, and start building a case for why I'm relevant. And at the end of the day, you know, you need to think of, you know, when a professor wants to select you and wants to work with you, you know, like what are they looking for? They're looking for somebody, it's almost like a job application, right? It's like, yes, this person has training potential, but they also have the skills that would be relevant to me and my research program in the future, or could develop those types of programs or skills. And so if you have things that indicate that on your CV, then what your exact title of your major is really not that important. And I think one of the things is that when you're applying to fellowships, when you're applying to scholarships and whatever else, you're constantly revising your life story. And, you know, there's the story that you lived with a lot of confusion, and they don't need to see all that confusion, right? They can see a more refined trajectory, a more refined narrative of how you present yourself. And so it becomes the skill of self-presentation, right? Who you present to yourself as a psychologist might be different than how you present yourself to an anthropologist. And so learning to do that will go a long way. Do others want to add anything? Any other field switchers? Okay, all right then. You guys stuck to your fields. So then I guess one of the things is, other questions that we have is it advisable to do a master's program in mental health field before or after working experience, which might be a better choice? I guess maybe let's answer it more generally. Like, let's say, is it better to do a master's program before or after working in that specific field?
I think there's no necessary advantage of both choices that you can, because I know some of my friends, they will use before they apply to the master's program of clinical psychology, they work as a volunteer or work as a full-time employee in some mental health organization, and that can strengthen their perspective on how to deal with clients and how to gain the clinical experience. And right after the master's program, they may gain skill and maybe knowledge, mental health knowledge, and they will also help them to strengthen their skill set. So in the long run, I think there's not much differences, I guess.
Do others have any thoughts or suggestions as to whether it might be useful to work in the field of your master's first, then get the master's, or get the master's first, then actually work in their field?
I personally think, each way have the pros and cons. So if you have, working experience first, you will know exactly how the field is, what are the skill and knowledge is required for the field. And then with all of that, you go to the master program. So you will have a better direction of yourself, what you need to learn from the program and what kind of thing that you want to gain from the program. The other way is not, it's not bad too. It is good too, because if you don't have any experience or any skill in the field, you jump in the master program with a very fresh mind. You have, open mind to absorb everything. People say when you are like an empty bucket, you can absorb more knowledge and skill and different perspective than you already have, something in yourself. So for me, both way have both pros and cons. It really depends on your own situations, which one is better for you, which one is more suitable for you. For example, now is the time for you to go to the master degree and you have fantastic scholarship that you can apply for and you can get it. Just go for it. Don't neglect it. Or now you think that it's not the right time to apply for the master program and scholarship, because you still need time maybe to prepare your language or some other thing, and you have a job opportunity that in the field that you want to do. So just go for it. So I think there's no good answer for everything. It's very situation. It's very situated on your personal situations.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's do two last questions. So one of the questions in the chat is, I guess, related to recommended scholarship programs that they can apply for. So maybe you guys could give people just some of the major scholarships that you're aware of, maybe ones that you personally applied for, so that people can maybe keep a list or note of those types of scholarships.
Maybe I can answer this question. Specifically for candidates from Southeast Asia, I think there are a bunch of government scholarship. For example, Fulbright Scholarship in the US, Chevening Scholarship in the UK, Erasmus Mundus scholarship, like the one I'm doing right now in Europe. And there are also a bunch of other scholarships you can apply directly from the university, where you can get funding for your study, partially or fully. It depends, but it really exists. And there's also some external funding or scholarship from certain foundation. For example, I got this Konrad Adenauer Foundation scholarship for my internship in Germany when I was in my third year. Yeah, so all of those are the options that you can look for. But I have to say there are a lot of it out there.
I agree. There's a lot. Like for example, in Vietnam, Vietnamese have like the VAF scholarship too. So that's one they call it for Vietnamese people too. You know, like many years ago they have like foundation scholarship, and now I'm not really sure whether it's still, you know, like funded for a Vietnamese scholarship scholar anymore. But also like Fogarty NIH Fogarty fellowship is it's really depend, but you can do the search online about the Fogarty fellowship. So it's mostly like for example at Emory University where I, you know, like where I accomplished my master program, they still have that fellowship too. So, for those who are working on HIV field too, or like in if you want to go to Australia, they have government scholarship for Australia's government scholarship too, that funded for Vietnamese applicant too. Or as Soching says, you know, like go to the university website. There's a lot, you know, like every university have their own scholarship funding or fellowship funding, things like that. So yeah, just go and do a lot of checks to see which one is suitable for you.
Yeah, I can add some points on the scholarship provided by Australian government. The name of it is Research Training Program. Every university have I think 10% of the amount can for international applicants to apply, but it really depends on the university. So there's some tricks here. Maybe you can like apply to some not that popular university, so they have more amount say for international applicants. So, and I think in
only one thing. Sorry, go ahead.
You can add
yeah, I because like when you apply for a university scholarship, just go and check all of the criteria and also all of the things that they cover, because it's very different. You know, like comparing between a university is very different. For example, like La Trobe University, they have scholarship, but they only cover for stipends and also like the tuition fee. But I know other Australian university, for example, University of Melbourne or University of New South Wales, there's not only cover for stipend and the tuition fee, but also for the health insurance too. Remember that when you go to another country to study, you need to have health insurance in order to get the visa. So like, for example, in my case, I have to pay for the health insurance by myself, which is not, you know, like small amount at all. But other country, other university like University of Melbourne and University of New South Wales, I know that they cover for health insurance too, which is like a large amount of money.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that that's a good point too, about not necessarily just applying to the famous universities or to the most popular ones. You can do that, but oftentimes, of course, that's more competitive. And also then you're going to be competing with more people for funding. And there may be places, especially in, say, parts, because the United States, for example, is so big that there are lots of parts of the United States that people don't really, who are here, like it's not their first choice to live there. But so the university is then actually potentially trying to attract people, you know, who have your skills and background and stuff like that. And so it's kind of a trade-off then that like, okay, well, you're not going to be living in Los Angeles, or you're not going to be living in New York City. Maybe you're going to be living in Nebraska. but they might pay you a lot of money to live there and study. I mean, relative to what the cost of living is and everything, and it might actually be a pretty good deal for you. So that's just something to think about, is like there are hundreds of universities, and, you know, try to really like do an extensive search.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something really quickly, which is that I think one of the things and one of the questions that we really didn't get to, but I think really we covered in different parts, is just this aspect about, you know, like that there are these professors in Southeast Asia who have strong connections to US universities and US collaborators. And so if you are connected to those professors, then there are probably going to be opportunities for you to study abroad, to go through, especially if you're in, say, public health, for instance. But certainly, you know, their collaborators might be interested in taking you on as a master's or as a PhD student in particular. So there might be, you know, like less competitive or traditional, like sort of less widely known routes to securing funding for a PhD in particular. And I would say one of the things, you know, is to really get to know people in Southeast Asia, really to know the professors that are active and that have these types of research programs that you can get involved in either as an undergraduate or, you know, as a recent graduate, and using that as an opportunity to widen out your network. So I'm just going to quickly name some universities that are like just kind of like pretty well known in the global mental health field. And I also just want to quickly note one thing, which is sometimes people that sometimes undergraduates that I've worked with in Vietnam specifically have this misunderstanding that if they do a master's or a PhD in psychology in the US, that they can continue to do research in Vietnam. And that's not true at all, because almost all psychology research in the US is conducted in the US at, you know, in the university setting. So, you know, if you really want to really make it a point to continue working in Southeast Asia, then you really need to diversify a little bit in terms of your thinking. It's not to say that it's impossible. Certain professors, again, do work in Southeast Asia, but it's very rare, particularly in the US. I think Europe maybe is a little bit different. But so just to be mindful of that perspective. So in the US, at least, the programs or universities that I know of that are pretty like strong in global mental health is, for instance, Vanderbilt, Hopkins University, John Hopkins University, University of Washington, Columbia, and let's see, and Harvard, and what other programs, and UNC Chapel Hill as well. And I would also say, you know, maybe Emory is developing a little bit of its mental health program. It was really starting up when I was there. There weren't as many people, but I think they're trying to get more people. And then I think what other universities would be strong that you could think about? I think in the UK, King's College London is particularly good. In Australia, you know, I think one of the major ones that I could think of is the Center for Global Mental Health at the University of Melbourne. That really specializes in a lot of this. But then you also have a lot of professors, maybe like, you know, the entire university, or like there isn't a huge global mental health center, but there are these professors that are really good and do a lot of work in global mental health that you could do a little bit of research about. So I think with that, I mean, I wonder if you guys have any last advice or thoughts to the attendees, and then also whether you would be willing to give your contact information to them so that they can reach out to you afterwards. Anyone
Maybe
wants to
I'll
go
go first.
Go ahead, Lee.
Okay. So actually, like when we are talking about scholarship and also like go to another country to study, I always want to really emphasize the first thing is like networking. You know, like networking is very important, not only in your daily life, but also in your professional life. When you're working, networking is very important. And the second thing is like know yourself, know what your strength is, know what your background is, and know what you want to be in the future. Because only when you know who you are, what you want, and where you want to be in the future, so you can have a better blend of yourself and everything like that. And also I'm really happy to have anyone reach out to me and asking anything related to my study and scholarship.
Yeah, same to Lee. I think when we look at transitioning back to school or maybe continuing our school life, think of it beyond just school life, because you're going to spend at least 1 year, maybe 2 years, even more, in a new country, where I totally agree with Lee that you need to find your own network in there, or immersing yourself in a new society, adjusting your life into the new country. And all of those things are, to me, is a very important experience beyond just our academic pursuit. And yeah, and also have fun at the same time. Yeah, and also I am open to also share my contact or answer any further questions you may have. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I want to jump in here. I think only thing I would say is that, if you're considering applying for graduate school, is that I hope you can have confidence in yourself, and really build a good support system around you. I think that's part of the reason we're building this community, right? We're here to, show you that it's entirely possible for you to do graduate education wherever you want. And that really, the person that has to root for yourself the most is yourself, right? And if you're, at this conference, you're really trying to learn, that really shows that you are really determined to do this field of work. And yeah, I just want everybody to, remain confident in what they're passionate in. And I'm sure that will translate in many ways into like a good graduate application and hopefully good graduate studies as well. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to drop my email and have people contact me just about grad school applications.
Yeah, I'll also add a few words. Maybe I'll summarize in 3 questions. Like the first one is to understand who you are. So in the application the process, maybe you keep thinking and keep reflecting who you are in your life history, and also what you learned and why you want to do this decision. And the second is what you have, like what resources you have, what is the network you have, you can ask for them, and what's the knowledge or to understand your surrounding, your environment. And then the third question will be to know what you want, what you really want. After understanding yourself and understanding your environments, your resources, you will find the answers of, is applying grad school really achieve what you want, or is there any way that they can also achieve what you want to get or want to attain in your life? So I think keep questioning yourself about these 3 questions will be fruitful for your experience, no matter what the outcome will be.
Yeah, I think these are all great advice, and what we'll do is we'll circulate sort of the email addresses of the panelists to folks, and they can feel free to reach out. I think one last advice I just want to give is really kind of not you, like I feel that sometimes, people do things because they feel it's the natural progression of what they need to do. So like, let's say, you finish a bachelor's, you feel like it's the natural thing is to do a master's. After you finish the master's, the natural thing to do is a PhD. After the PhD, the natural thing to do is to be a professor. And I feel like, you really do need to ask yourself, and that's part of knowing yourself, is really what at the end of the day, what is it that you want to accomplish? Because, the reality of it is that, every job is just a platform for you to do what you want to do. And, if you wanted to, actually make money, like academia is not the best route for you. And, so like you really need to be asking yourself, well, what is it that I want to accomplish? What is it that I'm really orienting towards and that I want out of my life? And to really interrogate yourself in that question. And then it will change throughout the course of your graduate career and throughout your life. And I would say, I mean, the process of coming to terms with those changes can be sort of like coming to terms with the end of a marriage. But you will kind of, but part of it is, growing and embracing that change. And yeah, and it is very natural through graduate school. So thank
I'm
you
sorry,
so much
one last thing
go
that,
ahead.
that people, please remember to document everything that you did. I mean, like, if you don't want to write out everything that you did, every task that you have done, you will forget. And when you need, like material to prepare for personal statement or scholarship application, you have nothing to do it. So the last thing I want to, mention is remember to document everything, every task that you've done, and every achievement, even if the smallest one that you have accomplished.
Agreed. And I would say keep an updated CV too. Like really, just don't update your CV frequently. Don't do it just once a year or like once every 2-3 years. As long whenever you have a publication come out or you have like a new award or something, update that CV. So anyways, thank you so much for to everybody. And I just wanted to just paste in the chat now, again, the link to the poster session, which is happening in a separate Zoom. So if you want to go to the poster session, please click on the Zoom on the chat. And then afterwards, after the poster session, you can come back to this link, to this chat, this Zoom session for the session number 2 on disruption and recovery with Dr. Elena Leslie and Tin Su. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. And thank you so much to our brilliant panelists. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night or a good day. Bye. Yep. Thank you to everyone. Please do click on that chat in the chat box if you want to go to the Zoom session, the poster session. There are over 15 and 20 presentations. All very exciting. Thank you so much, everyone.